2025 meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. We have 3 meetings this evening: a Grants and Community Development meeting, a Parks and Recreation Committee meeting, and a Building and Planning Committee meeting. Now, before we start, I'd ask that you silence your cell phones. There's amplifying equipment available for those who are having difficulty hearing. The room is also equipped with telecoil technology. And later, when the floor is open for public comment, we will first take public comment from those who are present in the room. Then we will turn to those who are attending virtually. We ask that you introduce yourself and say broadly where in the township, what neighborhood you live in, before starting your comments. So we'll turn to our first meeting for this evening. It's a Grants and Community Development Committee meeting. And I recognize its Chair, Commissioner Epstein.
Thank you, President Sinai. We only have one item on the agenda today. This first item is me making a motion, and the motion is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution for the adoption of the 5-year consolidated plan 2025 to 2029 and the annual action plan for year 51 in the amount of $984,616 and the filing of Fund Year 51 CDBG application, including all assurances and certifications therein. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Woodring. Emily, do you want to come up just in case we have questions? Or, yeah, you know. We all received the budget, so if you have questions, she's here. Do we have any public comment? There's no one in the room. Is there anyone on Zoom? No. Okay. Any questions or comments from the committee? Commissioner Kramer.
I've spoken a number of times about the fact that I think that we should be paying for staff salaries, at least in greater part, for the Ardmore Avenue Community Center out of our general fund. And I am hoping that I'm not going to be making a motion to make a change to that allocation tonight because I understand that staff believes that a more appropriate approach would be to first include additional money in the budget and during our budget deliberations, and then to make a change, if any, next year.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Emily. And we're going to call for the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that passes unanimously. That concludes the business of the Grants Community Development Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Epstein. And thank you very much for all of staff's hard work and your hard work preparing that for us. And just a sign of how smoothly it went from all the preparation that you've done. So I appreciate it. Our next committee meeting for this evening is the Parks and Recreation Committee. I recognize its Chair, Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you. There's one item on the agenda of the Parks and Recreation Committee, which is a resolution indicating the new grant identification number and reauthorizing execution of grant-related documents for the Parkside Kinwood extension of the Kinwood Heritage Trail Project. I move to I recommend to the Board of Commissioners adopting a resolution indicating the new grant identification number and reauthorizing the Township Manager to execute all documents and agreements, including reimbursement agreements, between the Township of Lower Merion and the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission related to the Parkside Kinwood extension of the Kinwood Heritage Trail. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Commissioner Rossman. Donna, can you please explain this?
Absolutely. So this is the fourth time we're coming before you to add some additional grant funds to this project. It is scheduled to be completed at the end of October. There was a few delays to get right of entry from SEPTA, and then a few delays for approval of the safety plan. But we finally got there. They've been under construction since this past winter. About January they began, but we were only able to work weekends only due to flagger needs and getting flaggers from SEPTA. So it has prolonged the process, which has added some additional costs for construction inspection and oversight, as well as some unforeseen things once they were able to get in there and start clearing and grubbing along the rail bed there. A lot of remaining rail was discovered, and the railroad ties were discovered, which is not appropriate for the base of the trail, so all that needed to be excavated. So the additional funds are to cover that cost, as well as when talking with the grant funders, they said that they may have some additional funds available that would cover the township commitment, which was up to $250,000 we were covering in rec fees, that this additional grant money would cover all, most if not all, of the commitment of the township dollars. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any, is there any public comment on this motion? Jody, anybody on? No, it's on screen. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. Just wanted the timeline. You're applying for the grant now. When are you going to hear back from the appropriate sources?
So we've been granted the funds. It's a reimbursement agreement, so we've been putting out the money and then we get reimbursed through the PennDOT system. So it's all the grant funds have been secured up to this additional 410, I believe. So what would happen, we need this resolution to continue the process to get that additional $400,000 added. So, you know, after the commissioners meeting next week and we receive the finalized resolution, we would submit that through the system, and it you know, could take up to a month for them to grant the additional funds.
Are you saying this $400,000 is more of a formality?
At this point, yes.
Boy, where can I sign up? Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? President
Thank
Simon.
you. Just to follow up, so the memo we got said a projected completion date of this fall.
Yes.
Is still on track for that?
Yes.
Okay, well that's great news. Happy to hear it. Thank you.
Are there any others? Then I just want to make one comment, which is great work, Donna.
Thank you.
At this point, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Nobody opposed? It's unanimous. Jody, thank you. And that concludes the business of the Parks and Recreation Committee.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Our last committee meeting for this evening is the Building and Planning Committee. I recognize its chair, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. We have a very extensive agenda tonight. The first is the escrow releases. Before I make the motion, there are two tonight. Would any commissioner like them either to be considered individually? Seeing none. I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to release funds held in escrow as improvement guarantees in accordance with Section 135-7 of the Township Code for the following: 211 Belmont Avenue, LCB Senior Living Development, escrow release number 6 final for $8,630, and 37 Simpson Road subdivision, escrow release number 1 for final for $150,650. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavrin. Any commissioner questions, comments? Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor, raise your hands. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. The next item is the resolution for authorization of appointment to the Ardmore Initiative Board of Directors. And I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution to appoint Peter Spain to the Board of Directors of the Ardmore Initiative for a term expiring January 7, 2030. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavrin.
Indifferent.
Any commissioners have questions? Presumably, Chris can answer questions on this if anyone has questions or comments. We did see a bio of Mr. Spain in our materials. Seeing none, is there any public comment on this matter? Ms. Coase, please.
Carrie Coes, owner of Pucci Manuli in Ardmore, board chair of the Ardmore Initiative. And in this seemingly, what seems to be fleeting in terms of honesty and integrity and doing the right thing, Peter has all those qualities, and the board is lucky to have them.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, and no one online, I assume. Okay, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Carries unanimously. We now have 2 certificates of appropriateness. We're going to consider these individually. The first, I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following of a certificate of appropriateness as recommended by the Historical Architectural Review Board at the meeting held on June 3rd, 2025, 7 East Lancaster Avenue, Ardmore Commercial Historic District, 25-14. Approval to replace 1 existing rooftop cellular antenna and add 1 antenna to an existing sled mount on the rooftop, citing Secretary of the Interior Standards 9 and 10. Is there a second? The Commissioner, little variety. Commissioner Churchill, thank you very much. Okay. Once again, we have our Building and Planning Director, Chris Leswing, if anyone has questions or comments on this application from commissioners. Seeing none. Any public comment on this matter? Nope. Okay, we will call the vote. All those in favor, raise your hands. Thank you. Any nays? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. The next one, I am going to move to recommend approval. To move to recommend the board approve the certificate of appropriateness as recommended by the Historical Architectural Review Board at the meeting held on June 3rd, 2025, 29 West Lancaster Avenue, Ardmore Commercial Historic District, 25-15. Approval of the completion of the unapproved painting of brick facade, citing Secretary of the Interior Standards 7 and 9, subject to confirmation to staff of the exact masonry paint product used, that the electrical conduit be painted to match, and that the holes in the masonry be patched. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Woodring. So Chris is here. Chris, do you mind, since this one apparently involves work that was started without seeking the necessary permits, and there are some concerns, I gather, for the work and how it's going to proceed. Could you give us an explanation?
This is an unfortunate incident that put Harb in a difficult situation. A couple months ago, the owner or the operator of this business came before Harb with seeking some suggestions for improvements to the property. And Greg Pritchard, who's not here this evening, but our historic preservation planner, outlined what were the parameters are, what you can fix on your property, what you can't. There's a lot of education that goes on. And one of the things that Greg spelled out was, you can't paint the brick. They went forward, they were making improvements to the signage, making improvements to their windows, fixing up the facade of the building. One evening, it was a Thursday evening a few weeks ago, I saw Greg leave the building, went out down Lancaster Avenue. I followed him shortly thereafter, and I saw him stopped talking to this property owner while the property owner was painting the brick. So Greg caught him painting that evening, immediately shut down the job. Ernest Pendleton worked with Greg to instruct him to remove the paint. At that time, there was the paint was still wet. The property owner declined to do that and wanted to go to Harb to get some of the advice. And we reached out to Harb at that time because Harb has a number of experts on brick. The concern is when you paint older brick, it's not like painting a fence where you're keeping water out. What happens is it keeps water in, damaging the brick. We wanted to try to get the paint removed as quickly as possible. The applicant declined at that time, and by the time it got to Harb and Harb made the decision, it was in their estimation, it was too late to remove the paint. So what Harb has recommended was complete the paint, go forward, It'll do the minimum damage to the resource. This isn't one of the 1,800 buildings on Lancaster Avenue. It is an older building. It is in the historic district. HARB is recommending the least damage to the integrity of the building, certainly allowing the painting to be completed to make it look normal. And fortunately, the applicant was using a brick-colored paint that was along the way, so they were able to complete it. From our perspective in the building plan department, we've also fined this person the maximum amount that we're able to do, which is $1,500 administrative fine.
So one question that I have, sort of on a further out level than, what is this, if this recommendation is approved tonight, what does that do in terms of appearance of this building and how it fits in with the historic district?
It's still a brick building. Fortunately, the color is a brick color. I think to most people driving by, you're looking at it and you're saying it's still a brick building. There are a couple other brick buildings that are painted in the district. I believe the Junior League is painted along the way. So it's not a pure brick area that has been defaced, one in the middle of a whole series of them. There are other materials in this section. It's more, I don't think it's the appearance that's really the concern. I think to most people, you're going by as a commercial area, some people are used to seeing paint. They're not really aware of the damage that it can do to an older brick. It's really the structural integrity. That's our issue. And Greg and I spoke about this, and there is a new director with the Ardmore initiative. We really do need to get the word out about this. This is something, education that we need to do. Now, this wasn't, the applicant was educated before. They did know that. They can say they missed it in the email, they can say they missed it in the conversation, but we did advise them beforehand that they weren't supposed to do this.
And if the board were to say, because from what you've told us, that the HARB looked at this and said, they've already put the paint on, the paint can't easily be removed. So this solution that we've been asked to recommend tonight for approval is to make, in some sense, sort of to make the best out of a situation without asking the owner to do more. Did the HARB consider asking the owner to remove the brick and replace the brick?
I didn't attend that meeting. I'd have to get back to you offline on that with the I don't know if they went to that extent.
Yeah. Okay. Other Commissioner Whalen, please.
Quick question for you, Chris. So now that it's painted, you're saying it can never be unpainted safely because that would damage the brick? Or is it simply that the cost to remove the brick is?
It wasn't the cost. The issue was to remove the paint either through a chemical means or through power washing could damage the soft brick, and you would cause more damage to the structure of the material than was worth it.
So I guess the then was worth it is sort of a subjective question.
I don't think the HARB, I understand where you're going with it. It wasn't necessarily economics. It was really, we don't want to damage the integrity of a historic material. So if it was there, I think HARB felt that the best, for the long-range preservation of that resource, that material, having it painted was better than stripping the paint and then having it vulnerable going forward. That the brick would be more susceptible to water and it would open up the pores and it damages the structure of the brick.
So then what happens if we vote no tonight?
Vote no. The applicant would be required to remove that, but we would probably from a staff level want to go back to HARB and have some advice from HARB on how to do it. Right? There would want to be, what is the means? And I think we'd want to have a conversation before we just say no, maybe send this back to a subcommittee of HARB and have them have some alternatives on what were the best ways, what were the safest, least intrusive ways to remove the paint from the brick without damaging the resource.
All right, thank you. Should I just make a comment now?
Sure.
Quickly, my comment for the board and the public is, this is an atrocity. I am so livid. Not only did this person actually go get themselves educated. Staff did everything to tell them, Harb did everything right. And yet, if we vote yes tonight, we are saying, go ahead, do what you want, it's $1,500. $1,500 in the scope of the work that's being done on this building is literally nothing. We're just telling everybody on Lancaster Avenue that you can go ahead and paint your building if you want to, and completely ignore what Harb said. I would feel more comfortable. I understand the predicament we're in, the catch-22, so to speak. I would feel more comfortable sending this back to Harb without voting tonight in order to get more context of just what really does it mean to withdraw the paint. I mean, are we really structurally, harming the building? Is it just that you have to be really careful? I just don't feel like I personally have the framework to make that determination. And it may be that this comes back to us after going to Harb, and I'm going to vote yes because Harb tells me, gives me that framework. But I mean, my preference would be to send it back because as of tonight, I mean, I just can't say, I can't vote yes on this one.
Thank you. So why don't we see if others have comments, and then if you choose to come back and make a motion, we could do that. But Commissioner Gafford, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I feel similarly. Chris, you said the highest fine you could was a $1,500 administrative fine. Is that the highest fine you could do because it's administrative, or like could we take them to court and sue them for a lot more? That like, do we have other options beside a $1,500
When Ernest and I
fine?
looked at this, we really felt that on the books, what we had the tool to have is an administrative fine for having to issue the stop work order. That was the level. In our historic code, there aren't necessarily fines for not doing the work. We had to really look at this as a building code violation, and that's what we have on the books to do that.
So if we say you have to remove the paint, and Harb says, here's the way to do it, and they say, whatever, we're gonna sandblast it, and they ruin the brick and do whatever, then what? Do they get another $1,500 fine?
It is in a historic district. They must follow what Harb says. We don't usually get in a situation with that hypothetical. I'd want to get back. I want to look at all of our tools first before I really got into that conversation with you. One thing I could offer is the chairwoman of Harb is very familiar with Betsy Kremer, and we could, before next week's board meeting, if we didn't want to send this back to Harb, I could certainly, I'm sure, I could reach out to her this evening, and I could have a briefing, by the end of the week or early next week from her. I would really reach out to her. She's the one on Harb has most of the experience in this, to really, what are those options?
Okay.
And be able to educate everybody with that before the board meeting next week if you needed that.
That would be helpful. And then another question along those lines, and maybe it's for you, maybe it's for her. If they remove the paint and it does do damage to the bricks, what's the next? Is it replacing the bricks, or is it like then you have damaged bricks on the building?
That's a good question. I think you'd want a more detailed report than I can provide you this evening.
Okay. Yeah. With that info, I mean, I certainly won't move forward with approving this motion. So, thank you.
Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. Looking at these pictures, it seems as if the side of this building has not been painted. If we pass this authorization, would the owner be allowed to paint the side?
Not without approval. It's all, the sides and the front and the back and the top are all in the historic district.
Okay. So how much would this owner be able to complete? Just the front?
Well, and that's what they did. This is a new small business owner. They were trying to draw attention, have a clean facade to their building, investing in the Ardmore district, or investing in a new sign, cleaning up the windows, making a nice storefront. So it's a very small little storefront that you have on Lancaster Avenue, but it's a one-story area that projects out into the sidewalk from that part of the facade.
Okay.
It's not a very large
Yeah.
facade.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Zeloff.
So, Chris, it says in here that there were other considerations, including that the paint was applied to a latter addition onto the original historic structure. What does that mean?
So, as I mentioned, the building, there are older buildings in Ardmore Commercial District as we go by. And then this is a addition that goes out into the front, so the older addition may be 100-something years old. I don't know the exact date, I apologize. Greg would have that off the top of his head. But this is something that was constructed many years later. It's a mid-20th century addition. This isn't, but it's still regulated and still in the historic district. So technically, it cannot be improved without HARB approval, and HARB would never have allowed that brick to be painted.
Mid-20th century, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s.
I think it's a little earlier than that, but yeah, somewhere around the mid.
So it's not the original building?
Correct. This is in addition to the original building, which is set back a little further.
Okay.
So that was one of the, to your point, that was one of the factors that HARB looked into this. I think they would have been a lot more concerned if it was that original building, but it's still a resource in the historic district.
It seems to me that from this paragraph, additional HARB comment, that they considered many of the issues that have been raised tonight. Is that, do we know, is that accurate?
Yes, they have, and that's where they weighed this. This was a long meeting. This was a long meeting. They discussed this for a couple hours before they came to this decision.
Great. Okay, thank you.
But you're only seeing the Cliff Notes version of it. I can get you I can certainly be able to provide you with a more detailed report.
Thank you.
Okay, other commissioners? Oh, Commissioner Woodring.
Thank you, Commissioner Rex. So I understand that with the brick itself being older, more porous, it likely absorbed a lot of that paint, probably down to like 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. So even if you sandblast the surface of the brick itself, there's a good chance it will just have this like weird faded appearance after the fact. So the brick will be damaged. I don't know if it'll jeopardize the structural integrity of the brick per se, but one thing I would like the HARB to kind of comment on is if they can have the owner repoint the mortar at least, because that'll at least restore it back to the look of like traditional brick and mortar. And that will at least give us a closer appearance than just a flat color across the whole face. Chris, I'm not sure, do you know if HARB looked into just repointing the mortar?
I don't, but you can certainly, if you want to do it in your motion, you could include that they should, if you send it back to HARB, that HARB should evaluate that. Because they could put they can put that burden back on the applicant to be able to demonstrate that they can do that.
Okay.
Oh, is that on me now?
What's that?
Or did you want to do that motion? Or?
Well,
That'll close my comment at least.
why don't we see, I think we have one other commissioner who wants to make a comment, and then we can see where we are. Yeah, President Simon.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Grimes. It's just, there are two issues before us. One is, what happens to the look of the historic resource. The other is, and this is where I'm coming from, it seems like the willful disregard for the requirements is troublesome, right? And while I agree that more education needs to be done, I think generally we feel like it's the obligation of people to know the law, right? And certainly, the township already went above and beyond for educating people. So just for HARB, like the $1,500, were they like that? Oh, that's appropriate for this, or they were just like, that's the most you could do. Okay, we'll go with that.
The fine was not levied by HARB. The fine was levied by the Building and Planning Department.
HARB doesn't weigh in on that.
HARB does not issue fines.
Okay.
This is, if they're watching tonight, they're learning of the fine.
Got it. And then the second question is, what are the requirements to get a certificate of occupancy? Does it need approval by, have met all of HARB conditions, et cetera?
No.
Right, so to a degree, like the length of time it might take to get a CO could potentially be something in addition to the $1,500 that is meaningful here.
Correct.
Because this thing's not going to proceed until this board is satisfied.
And it's been about a month already. So when it was about a month ago that we discovered, that Greg discovered this, and we issued a stop work order immediately, it's, it's been going on. They haven't been able to occupy the site. If you go by, it just says it has paper in the window. So that owner, who's a small business owner, is hoping to open up a business, has already been delayed a month.
Okay.
That is a hardship, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes.
Okay. So, other commissioners? Okay. Why don't we see if there's public comment, and then we'll come back. Is there any public comment on this one? Please, sir, you can come up here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Paul McKillia, and I'm the small business owner who is looking to open up a home decor store at 29 West Lancaster Avenue. I wanted to attend this meeting to, one, answer your questions and also address any of your concerns. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity that this is a public meeting, that I can attend and share with you my perspectives and also what transpired that brought us to this point in time. Just for some context, I recognize the importance of the role that folks like the Harb have in this community. They're the ones who are really focused on retaining the historical character of this commercial district, and I want to acknowledge their work. I had submitted 2 applications to the Harb, one in February when I had was initially sort of submitting all my applications for the signage and also to get approval for some of the facade work that I wanted to do. I received some feedback, and the feedback was sort of general, where sort of, okay, it looks like the work you're trying to do is just mostly maintenance, you're just doing some painting here and there. But what I did not clearly have awareness of is that the brick facade that is in question right now could not be painted. I also submitted a second application for my signage, which was approved, and I made a mistake, and I take a responsibility for the fact that the painting of the brick facade proceeded without getting full Harb approval. At this point in time, I recognize a number of questions we're all trying to sort through. One question is about what would happen if the paint is stripped off the building. I've been in touch with my contractor and the paint team. They've essentially told me that that would affect the pH level in the bricks. So even if you strip the paint off the bricks, it won't return the facade to its original color. There'll be some discoloration. That's something to consider. Second thing also to consider is also that this work was an attempt to harmonize the historical brick, the building that's from the late 19th century, with the addition that was put in 1953. Those are different types of bricks, so if you look at the building originally, the brick that was added on in the 50s was brown brick that is different in character than the red brick that's for the original building. We're not touching that building, we're trying to harmonize the color. So this paint situation is one where I take full responsibility, but the goal was essentially to beautify the building and to harmonize the building from top to bottom so that it could actually have one color profile. So I'm happy to take any questions that any of you might have. I could also just share with you that my opening date has been set back by about 3 months now. I'm ready to comply with the rules of the township. I'm ready to, I'm now learning of a fine that I will have to contend with. I'm ready to take all these things into account, and just happy to answer your questions or leave it at that if you folks have other items on your agenda tonight. So thank you.
Okay. So we don't normally do question and answer in public comment, but since you're the applicant, there's a little bit of a different rule. So if you don't mind, Commissioner Woodring, did you have a question for the applicant, or?
Not so much a question, but something I would recommend posing to your contractor that is probably a larger problem that's being underlooked. So old brick and stone is porous.
Yes.
And the benefit to that is it allows it to breathe, so it can warm and cool, and it can dry out after a storm. By painting brick, it virtually creates like a vapor barrier on the face of the brick, which will trap moisture inside the brick. So by doing that, you're now trapping moisture in your wall assembly.
Yes.
And that could develop into a larger concern later. So I would just, just a recommendation, like ask the contractor about that, because if the painting is ultimately going to deteriorate the inside of your wall cavity, you're going to have larger problems down the road. So that's something just to bring up. But this is where repointing the brick might be beneficial to allow other alternative ways for the moisture to mitigate out of the wall and dry out. So repointing brick, weep holes, like these are all things I would recommend that you talk to your contractor about. But the repointing of the brick is something that I would like Harb to comment on.
Thank you.
So, all right, before with the applicants here, is there anyone else have questions for the applicant? And then we can just turn it back to, unless there's other public comment, we can just turn it back to conversation, discussion. Go ahead,
So I
Commissioner
did
Gabbard.
have a question. I know our Director of Building and Planning said that you were confronted pretty early on to remove the paint while it was still wet, while it could be done, and you denied, you refused to do so. What happened that night?
So I was not asked to remove the paint until a week after, and I took counsel from my contractor who told me that removing the paint could damage the brick. And my goal is to minimize any damage to a building that I do not own, building that I'm going to be renting the commercial space. I don't have the ability to I'm not an expert in these matters, so if my contractor gives me certain advice, it's the advice I'm going to share with the Harb. It was not in any way to ignore any sort of advice that Harb or the Building and Planning Committee was offering. I was just dealing with the fact that my contractor is telling me one thing. I also don't own the building, so I have to try and figure out what is the best way to minimize any damage to this building that I do not own.
So I hear you, and thank you for that. I'm hearing you say I wanted to minimize damage to the building. Harb told you, we heard, Harb told you not to paint it. You want to minimize, hang on, you want to minimize damage to the building. You were told to remove it by the township, but then you went to your contractor who said, nope, leave it as is. There's a disconnect here.
So Harb did not explicitly, so there was a miscommunication, that's why I proceeded with the painting. So I was under the assumption that I could paint the facade. Had I known, I would not have proceeded with that action. That's the first thing I'll just say. The second thing that I'll also say that, and I'm taking responsibility for these things, is that I did not ignore any sort of counsel to remove the paint. I'm trying to weigh all these things and trying to figure out how to proceed, given that I don't own the building and I'm not an expert in these matters. So if my contractor tells me one thing, then I'm inclined to rely on that advice, because I was trying to get even a meeting with folks here in the Building and Planning Commission. I called, and all I was referred to was, hey, just attend to the Harb meeting and we'll proceed through the official channels. And that's what I'm happy to do.
Did you talk to the owner of the building about painting it before you painted it?
I'd informed him.
Okay.
Yes.
And he was fine with it?
Yeah, I think he probably he didn't know that he wasn't allowed, that painting wasn't allowed.
Okay.
I shared that information with him, and he's been aware of also all the interior renovations that have been happening inside the storefront.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Again, anyone questions for this gentleman? Commissioner Bernhardt.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sir, I may not be alone in this, but when you stated you didn't own the building, that sort of caught me by surprise. I thought you were the owner. Who is the owner of the building?
The owner of the building is the landlord who I'm leasing from, a landlord who has a holding company that owns the building.
And do you know the name either of that individual or the company?
Yes, I'm familiar with the name of the company.
And that is whom?
It's Calpin LLC.
Okay, all right. And then Chris, did we not have the owner make this application as opposed to a tenant? Is that a little bit unusual?
I'd have to look at the application to see if it was done with the owner's consent. I'm going to assume that it was going forward. Much like with a subdivision, applicants can bring things forward with the property owner's consent. I'd have to pull them. I don't have the actual file in front of me.
Right. And if you just want to, by norm, is it not the property owner that's the one that makes the application as opposed to a tenant?
Not always. We get applications for signage in all throughout the Ardmore Historic District, and they're done by the business. A lot of times, many businesses don't own Restaurants don't own the building outright, they're leasing the building. They're coming forward with a signage application and window improvement applications.
And then one last, thing, they would then provide, all right, here's my lease, which allows me to do X, so.
I think there's a box that we have to check.
So somewhere along, in all the homework everyone's giving you, you'll find out what dots connect from this gentleman to the owner.
Correct.
All right, and then, sir, I want to say, appreciate you coming forward. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So, any other, I don't want to, anyone else for this gentleman? Seeing none, thank you, sir. You can have a seat.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
So, by the way, before I say anything else, Chris, did you have anything you wanted to say at this point?
And I respect the applicant. He has been rather responsive. He's been responsive and accountable through the whole process. And he has made it, from his perspective, he does feel it was misunderstanding. We believe it was an email. I don't think there was from my perspective, I don't think this was willful disregard, but it was a misunderstanding, and this is what happened. I think as Harb has come forward, what's the best solution to do this?
Right. So, having said that, it's my sense that we need some answers and consideration from Harb as far as what the best solution is. I think they took a stab at this, but there's obviously more factors at work than we know the answers to tonight. So I am going to move to table this matter. My sense of it as I make that motion is we don't know if we will have these answers since Harb has to be consulted by the next month's building and planning meeting. So I don't know that I'm not going to propose we table it to a date certain because some of this depends on Harb. So I am going to move to table this matter. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavrin. There's no discussion on motions to table, so we will take a vote.
Well, actually, there's a difference if it's to a date certain or not to a date certain as to when you have discussion, but are we going to get some expertise in there, just one or the other?
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Greg and I will reach out to Harb. As I said, the chairwoman of Harb has expertise in bricks particularly. They may come next month, but certainly this will be a discussion at the next Harb meeting, and they'll at least have written comments that we can convey back to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. I also like to have an understanding from staff about how a non-owner can submit on a building. It doesn't make sense. And I'd like to understand staff practice and what the code says.
Okay. We will call the motion to table. All those in favor, raise your hands. Are there any opposed? One opposed. Two, I'm sorry, okay. Any abstentions? Okay, so the motion carries. That concludes the items we have for discussion. I will just note that items 4 and item 5 are for information, releasing proposed ordinances that will be discussed at the July 9th Building and Planning meeting, discussed in potential action at that meeting. So that concludes the business of building and planning tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes. And one last thing before we adjourn, you might notice that the person sitting to my right is not Township Manager McNeely. It's our Assistant Manager, Brandon Ford, who didn't get promoted, just sitting in while Ernie's on vacation, but did a terrific job in a super complicated meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And he didn't say a thing.
With that, we are adjourned for the evening. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.